Welcome to South Florida saltwater fishing. I'm Heath, and it's time to get into the bite.
Wahoo in the boat, baby! That kickfish right there. There we go. I mean, you talk about epic fishing days. Yeah! Nice bull dolphin right there. Double header! Woohoo! Look at that mud snapper!
Alright folks, in this episode we're going to go over how to choose what type of fishing line to use and when it's more applicable to use it. That is braid or monofilament. Before we get into this though, if you want to learn more about fishing, grow as an angler, or just see some great and exciting offshore fishing adventures, you can start by hitting the subscribe button. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so that you won't miss a thing. Alright folks, so like I said, we're going over how to choose your main line of fishing, braid or monofilament. So I get the question a lot of time, what's better, braid or mono? So the answer is that they're both better. It just depends upon what you're doing. There are specific times where you want to try and use the different types of lines. And that's what we're going to go over. So there are a couple of points that I want to make clear when it comes to braid versus monofilament first. Point number one is that braid is way more expensive than monofilament. So just think about that in a budget-minded sense when it comes to spooling your reel. Sometimes you don't have to completely pack a reel with braid if you're going to use it. You can use like a 300-yard top shot on top of a mono backing. That'll save you some buck in the long run. The next point I want to make is the strength. Braid is way stronger than monofilament. For a simple example, if you've got 20-pound test braid and you've got 20-pound test monofilament, the 20-pound test braid is way stronger. It's, braid is virtually indestructible as long as it doesn't get nicked. So that's about the strength and the cost effectiveness factor of the two different types of lines. Something to very much consider when making your choice. So the first thing I want to talk about is braid and when you're gonna really want to use it. So the first style of fishing we're going to go over where you're going to have to use braid if you want to do it correctly is jigging. Whether it's slow pitch jigging or high speed vertical jigging or just any type of jigging, you need braid. You don't want your line to stretch as you're retrieving your jig and basically have your jig come up through the water in a smooth fashion on the negative pressure provided from the water where it's not doing what it's supposed to do. A jig is called a jig for a reason. It's almost doing a dance underneath the water as you're cranking up on it, whether you're pitching it or you're consistently making it, retrieve at a fast pace through the water column like high-speed vertical jigging. So if you're doing jigging, braid is going to be your main line of choice. And of course you're going to need some sort of top shot of fluorocarbon or mono on top of that, no matter what. That way when the fish strikes, it gets some stretch and retraction factor, helps you set the hook, and also you don't yank the hook out of the fish's mouth because of the non-elasticity of braid. The next type of fishing that you're definitely going to want to use braid for when it comes to it is deep dropping. Any sort of deep dropping, whether you're hand cranking it up or whether you're using an electric reel, your line is so far down that you won't be able to tell if you're getting nibbles and bites unless you're using braid. Braid is sensitive like that. Monofilament, if you hook a fish and you've got out 1,000 feet of line, it's just going to stretch and sort of get heavy, and you're really diving into the unknown when it comes to that. I do not recommend mono for deep dropping at all. And when it comes to deep dropping, you're going for tile fish, black belly rose fish. You can use it for sword fishing. You can use it for grouper fishing. But you're out so far that you need to feel when you are getting the strike. Braid is sensitive and allows that transfer of energy to flow through the line, and you feel it and you know when it's time to set the hook. Again, monofilament doesn't do that. So if you're deep dropping, you're going to want to go with braid. And again, you're going to need a top shot of leader on top of it, of course, to set the hook and not yank the hook out of its mouth. So if you can see a trend when it comes to using braid, no matter what, you still need some sort of fluorocarbon or monofilament top shot leader on top of it. And the last type of fishing that I would say you really want to go with braid on is planer trolling. Now, not to say that you can't use monofilament for planer trolling. However, a planer puts a great deal of stress on your monofilament from the stretching and the retracting, and it weakens your connecting point from your swivel to where you are hooked right up to the planer. So if you're going to use monofilament while planer trolling, I suggest it being a one-time use. Fish for the day. After that, make sure you re-rig. So the difference between monofilament and braid when it comes to planer trolling is braid gives you a consistency. It trolls the planer right. It trolls it at a consistent depth. Monofilament is stretching and retracting, stretching and retracting, stretching and retracting. So essentially your planer is going up and down in the water column. You don't really know. So if you've got a number 6 planer and you're trying to get down to 50 to 60 feet below the water surface, you know where you're going to be if you're using braid. If you're using mono, you're not achieving that goal. And so those are the 3 areas of fishing that I consider it to be very important to learn the practice of using braid when you're going to do them. Jigging, deep dropping, and planer trolling. You're going to want to get used to using the braided line so that the style of fishing that you're pursuing is done correctly in practice. And so now I want to go over the few instances where I say it's more than likely better to use mono as your main line. The first one of those is definitely when I'm anchored up and doing some reef fishing. Say I'm flatlining out for some yellowtail, dropping out a yellowtail jig or something like that, just consistently letting out line, and I hooked up with some simple baits, doing some fun snapper fishing over the reef. It's got more stealth, you can use a shorter leader. So what happens when you're reef fishing is you're letting your line out and the fish rips the line out of your hand. You slam your bell shut. The line stretches and retracts. And on the retraction, the hook is pulled back into the fish's mouth. That's how monofilament works and helps you set the hook. You're not yanking back. You let the monofilament do the work. And that's why I like monofilament on the reef fishing setting. The same goes with drift fishing too. I like to use monofilament mainline when I'm drifting. The fish strikes, the mono stretches and retracts. Now this is the same concept as having a shot cord of fluorocarbon or mono as a leader on your braid, but when you have the whole mainline, you get more of that rubber band effect. And in certain settings like these where you don't have to use braid because it doesn't pertain to the style of fishing, it's better to go with monofilament. And the last style of fishing that I really like to use my main line as monofilament is trolling. Top water trolling, not planer trolling. Basic top water trolling. Heading out offshore, going for dolphin, going for tuna. Maybe even in shallow water down in the Keys over the patch reefs, going for cirro mackerel, barracudas, yellow jacks, mutton snapper, big mutton snapper. You gotta have that line stretch and retract, set that hook real good, get those fish to the boat. And those are the general areas where I really like to use monofilament over braid. Reef fishing, drifting, and general basic trolling. And so now I get the question from many anglers, hey, what if I want a one-stop shop? What's really the best thing to do? Braid or mono? I got one rod, one reel, I'm on a budget, but I really want to be able to cover lots of ground and do as many different things as I can with this one tool. I would say do something like this. This is what I go with. What I got is my snapper spinner. On this, I have a backing of 12-pound monofilament, and then I have 300 yards of 12-pound braid on top of it. And then on top of that, I have a fluorocarbon leader of 20-pound test. So here's where it comes to the one-stop shop portion of this setup. So let's say I'm bottom fishing with it. I'm gonna want, at least a 50-foot, maybe a 75-foot long leader. Even though I have this braid, you're still fishing with the braid, but you want your leader to be long. You want it to be able to stretch and retract. And again, braid is highly visible. It is a fish detractant. Fluorocarbon is virtually invisible, which is a fish attractant. Now I say this long leader, 50 to 75 feet. You can also use that to troll with, general trolling, up on top, out in the stream looking for dolphin, looking for tuna, over the, the shallow water patch reefs in the Keys, going for, cirro mackerel, mutton snapper. If you've got that long leader, they'll come and they'll hit it. They're not going to see your braid, which looks like a little dark line in the water, which is unnatural. Let's say you want to use this same setup and do some jigging. Well, when you're jigging, you only need about a 15, maybe 20 foot long leader. So you trim that down and you go with it. And so that's what I would say to those of you who are looking for that one-stop shop. I'm not saying braid is better, but I'm saying, hey, if you really are looking to use just one reel, I would definitely put a 300-yard top shot of braid on top of some mono backing. And like I said, you're going to want to use a topical length leader depending upon the type of fishing you're doing. And so there you have it. That's my personal views about how to choose between braid mainline and monofilament mainline. You're going to really want to think about the type of fishing you're doing and the application of the line. Does it make sense? Alright folks, that about does it for this episode. Hope you had fun, hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned a little bit about what I consider to be a good practice when it comes to the decision-making process of what type of line to choose between braid and monofilament. Till next time, South Florida saltwater fishing, going wherever the cool wind takes us.